by the labels and the fables and the b-boys of old. Back in the day when I was doing my thing, record labels, turntables I was able to bring. My heart on my sleeve, all the beats that I need. For my rhymes and lines this time I will feast. So check the label, CBS is the fable. And music was a theme, first frontier from cradle. Trap back what I lack with passion in my backpack. Dirk and his white socks, my first stop to rhyme and rap. Throw down the mat, press play and get loose. Story rap labels and how they seduce.
Okay, Dudley, so thanks for joining us. So you're obviously a hip-hop MC and an artist in your own right with a vast back catalogue. We're big fans of your music at Live from the Groove, but we're actually here tonight to talk about digging for records. So, because I understand you've been collecting records pretty much since the 80s, and you might have even done a bit of DJing at one stage.
Yeah, absolutely, and in different forms actually. Yeah, because on the one hand, obviously, I've done the Pioneers Hip Hop show on Kane FM for well, probably close to 10 years now, maybe even a little bit more, which is DJing in a sense. And I do occasionally DJ out. I've always been, you know, my kind of main role in hip hop is an MC and a musician in that sense. But yeah, absolutely. You know, when I can, I do spin a few records on those decks. I would never claim to be the best DJ in the world. When I'm with people like Specific and, you know, guys like that who can really DJ, they're DJs. I can play records and choose the right records to play, but I haven't got all the skills and the tricks, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, more of a selector.
Yeah, I guess so, absolutely.
Cool. So has collecting records always been kind of a part of your life and one of your hobbies on and off? Or has it been...
Yeah, it has. And can I actually just say, because I didn't say that, thank you for having me firstly. It's great.
No worries, not at all.
And big ups to you guys, because, you know, Live from the Groove's done so much stuff. Love all the bits you've been doing. So, yeah, thank you for having me. But yeah, I think record collecting is probably where it all started for me, actually. You know, I can remember in the really early days, before I was into hip hop, when I was into things like Adam and the Ants, and even before that, I think the first record I ever got was Play That Funky Music, won it at the fair on Wimbledon Commons, throwing a dart in a card, and it was either that or a goldfish, and I got the 7-inch single of that. And yeah, ever since really, I've been fascinated with records, always loved them, and you know, when I kind of morphed into hip hop, it was just a natural progression, really.
Cool. Can you describe a record that got you into hip hop? And sort of, can you remember where and when you first heard it?
Yeah, I can. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether it's definitely the first hip hop record I heard, but before discovering hip hop, I was a huge Adam and the Ants fan, sort of 79, 80, 81, Kings of the Wild Frontier, that kind of era. Obviously, they did Ant Rap. Now, I wasn't looking out for hip-hop when they did Ant Rap, which I think was in 1981. It was one of those pop records that, you know, like there was Wham Rap, there were all of them. So, in a way, you could argue that was my first exposure, except I didn't think of it as hip-hop then because I was an Adam and the Ants fan. But around about 82, 83 was the time when I started getting into hip-hop. And I think the moment for me, and I can remember it was a mate of mine, Greg, and there was this alley next to his house, and we used to play football in it, and there was some garages, and because I vividly remember the ball would always like slam into the garages, and that probably people around there probably didn't really like us doing that, but anyway, that's where we played, that's where we kicked the ball around. And I remember one day, vividly actually, us just playing football, and him just saying to me, I've got this really amazing album, you've got to hear it. And it was that time when Adam and the Ants were kind of falling off in my mind. Adam and the Ants had become Adamant. I was less into it then. And then he introduced me, I'm pretty sure it was Electro 1, the one with I'm the Pac-Man and all that stuff on. And it just blew me away. And that was it. I was hooked at that point. And it kind of went from there for me, really. So yeah, it would be my earliest hip hop records that grabbed me, and it's a bit of a cliched answer, would be the Street Sounds Hip Hop Electro series.
Sure. It's just the sound of it, wasn't it? Back then, I guess it's just like
there was nothing like it. Absolutely nothing like it. It just blew me away, and I always liked music that did something different. And you know, not to go on about Adam and the Ants because I haven't listened to their music in years, but they had a special drumming style. It was like a double drumming style that no one else did. So beats, in a way, in a very different sense, were a big part of their music. And then hip hop came along, or hip hop electro, and the beats, the crispness of it. I just hadn't heard music like it, you know, and it was just, yeah, there was a clarity about it, especially that kind of electro sound that just blew me away and just grabbed me. And it was like overnight, this is the culture I want to be in. And of course, fortunately, where I grew up, there were a bunch of us who were breaking badly and doing really rubbish graph and all of that. And it came together. We had a crew called the Radioactive Crew, and later Radioactive Posse when everybody became a posse. And so it felt very natural, actually, to move into that.
The evolution of it is crazy as well. If you think like how basic something like scratching used to sound on those first records in the 80s.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the Tables Are Turning is probably an example of some actually really tight scratching on that record. But some of the scratching was so rough in those days, but it's still, like you said, it sounded incredible. Whereas you listen to how it's evolved now, it's...
But at the time, though, so I didn't mean to interrupt you there. It's like time delay, I think. At the time, those, those records, that early scratching, which was rudimentary, but it was groundbreaking at the time, you know. And I remember, Adventures on the Wheels of Steel, when you've got, Grandmaster Flash cutting some things up, and it's not like Hubert style kind of cutting or anything. But for me, when I heard that record, I'd never heard anything like it. It just blew me away.
Yeah. Can you remember was the record that got you into rhyming or inspired you to start sort of scribbling rhymes?
Gosh, again, it's difficult to pinpoint where that was, but I would say it would be some of those early MCs. So probably the first MC who I really noticed, who I guess changed my view on everything, would be Melly Mel. And records like Step Off and Beat Street Breakdown. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved The Message and all of that, but when The Message dropped in 82, that was kind of just before I got into hip-hop, and I tracked back and I loved all the Grandmaster Flash and Furious 5 stuff. But actually at the time, it was records like Step Off, as I say, that really grabbed me. So they were the first ones, because Mel for me just had a gravitas in his voice that no other MC had. You know, when you listen to a Melly Mel record, he commanded that record, you know, and that really got me interested in the MC. And then when you got to sort of 86, 87, you had people like Rakim, and then 87 you had Big Daddy Kane. You know, Rakim and Kane to me are probably two of the greatest MCs ever in terms of their finesse and their style and the skill, and an artist like MC Shan, another favourite of mine, just his voice, the way it cut through. So those kind of artists, I think, really inspired me, because obviously in the hip hop electro era, in kind of 83, 84, those early hip hop electro albums, and rightfully so, it was more about the producer, and that's of course how hip hop started. It was about the DJ. It was always about the DJ, be it Grandmaster Flash, DJ Breakout, Cool Herc. It was about the DJ. And even in the hip hop electro era, in a sense, the music took a front seat and the MC was slightly set back in that. But come kind of 86, 87, for me, the MC started to step forward. And you see it actually transitions, like if you take Kool G Rap and Polo, who started out as DJ Polo and Kool G Rap, and then by 88 it was Kool G Rap and Polo. Now whether that was just a semantics change or a deliberate change. There was almost like I don't want to say changing of the guard, because to me the DJ, the producer, the DJ is always the cornerstone of hip hop, because that's where it came from. But the MC became much more prominent. And like I say, Kane, Rakim, those sorts of MCs really inspired me. And that was the bit, I think, for me that really stuck. And probably the other thing worth saying is, at the time, I didn't have a lot of money, and I couldn't afford to have a setup of my own. You need to have proper turntables and all that kind of stuff. So in a way, the MCing side was the easy way to go, because I didn't need, A, load of technical kind of know-how, B, some expensive equipment. I could just spit to an instrumental on a record. And so, my earliest kind of rhymes would have been, I started writing around 1987. I think the first rap I ever wrote was late 86, and I didn't really write it. I took an emcee Shy D track called I've Got to Be Tough, and I just ripped it off, and I rapped it over Tro de D by Two Live Crew, and I basically looped that on my cassette player, and I basically really badly rapped MC Shy D's rhyme to that. And then come 87, I started writing my own rhymes, and I wish I had some of them on cassette actually. Now I've lost most of that early stuff. If I'm honest, it was probably really embarrassing and really poor, but it was great fun. I enjoyed it. I was so into the Bridge War at that time that I even recorded my own disc record for the Bridge War, even though I had nothing to do with it. I lived in the wrong country, didn't understand that culture at all, but I just loved it. And so it was around 87 that I started writing as an MC, and it was those kind of MCs that very much influenced me.
Can you remember, just going off on a tangent, but can you remember a turning point maybe when you realised that there was a bit of an American twang, or that you wanted to actually rap in a British accent? Because I'm guessing that initially you were was it an American accent?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there were a couple of turning points to me. Now, the first, I did definitely start rapping in an American accent, and it wasn't, without going into the politics of, I think you lose credibility now if you don't rap in your accent, but back in the day it was slightly different, because the main influencers of UK hip hop were American. So I don't knock those rappers like Junior G, Family Quest in the early days for rapping in an American accent, because that was their influence. And you could argue later on, when you had people like Jest and Task Force, fantastic artists, and a lot of people started rapping sounding like them, and in a way that's no different to. So anyway, that I'm going off a tangent myself, but basically I started rapping American, definitely. 89 was the point where I felt I had started to do something worthwhile. I remember I was in a library at school, and I wrote a rap it was one of the Jungle Brothers instrumentals on one of the albums. I can't remember if it was Straight Out of the Jungle or Done by the Forces of Nature. There were a couple of instrumental tracks on there. And I remember thinking, I really like this. It must have been early 89, maybe late 88, because I started sending demos out around 89. And then some of the early demos I did, so I did briefly work with Cold Sweat, and I also worked with Pinky and the Lat One Posse around sort of 88, 89, and they were kind of related to Lonzy D and all that lot. And I recorded some demos with them, and I've actually got those demos. I've never even on the album I did that had some old cuts on, I didn't put them on because they are quite American sounding, and I just couldn't let myself put those out. But so my early demos were like that. And then when I met Johnny F and Liberty Grooves started, we kind of started it was his label, but our first record marked the start of that label. That actually was where I changed my accent, and it was partly driven because, although our first record wasn't a hardcore UK record in the sense of like Hard Noise or Hijack, who were, incredible artists, and, I revere those records. I was nonetheless influenced by them. And I remember Johnny F actually saying to me when I came over to his house and I'd written Original Break, our first record, he was like, yeah, I like the fact you've taken a kind of UK take on it, and I think there might be a few slight American twangs in that record. I can't remember, but I'm pretty much everything recorded from my first record in 1990. I rapped in a UK accent, or I rapped in my accent. So they were the sort of changing points, really, and it was just very much because I looked around me and the artists at the time that I was feeling were rapping British. I thought that's a great idea. Whereas actually, when Rodney P and the London Posse were doing it in sort of 87, 88, I was probably still rapping in an American accent at the time.
Where were you at that? Were you in London at that time, or?
Yeah, so I grew up in London. I grew up in Rains Park, which is on the outskirts of London. So I kind of started Rains Park was right on the outside. So I always felt slightly, when I met Johnny F and things started from there, I felt incredibly lucky actually, because Johnny F, he had a foothold in it already. He was working with Julian of the Creators before they were the Creators, and he was, already knew lots of people in the industry. So I was really lucky to meet Johnny F, and it kind of got me a foothold, because where I was in Rains Park, we were a bit far from it all. We were almost on that Surrey border. So yeah, I kind of started my life in London, my hip hop career, as it were. And then around 91, moved to Southampton and got involved with the Southampton scene from there.
Cool. Because I was just wondering, because there's always that thing where London's always one step ahead than all these little pockets of the UK, where there were other obviously huge scenes everywhere, but it tended to be that they were maybe a little bit ahead musically generally.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling on that is actually, when I listen to what Bristol were doing, or Norwich, or, second to none down in Bournemouth, for me actually, and particularly listening now, I wouldn't say they were ahead. I think the regional scenes were incredible. They were just different. They were a different interpretation. I think the difference is, depending on where you were in London and the people you knew, you had access to greater resources. Now, we didn't actually, so I always felt slightly on it, because we were kind of on that Surrey border. We were almost just out of it. I did go up to Music of Life. I shopped a demo there, didn't get anywhere with that demo, but later on, with Cold Sweat, I did, and worked with Angelo Starr and all that, albeit briefly. But I think you had the advantage of resources in London. But it always felt to me it was about, like it is now, it was about who you knew. And it was hard about then because we didn't have the internet. With the internet, you can hook up, connect, talk to anyone. But back then there were these, it did feel like there were discrete pockets of people. And for me, it was really when I met Johnny F, that's when I got my kind of break into it, because I'd met someone who Johnny F's a couple of years older than me. He knew people on the scene. He was part of the scene. And so for me, that got my step in. But then when I moved to Southampton, I almost took my step out again, as it were, although I started working with some of the guys down here as well. So yeah, it's interesting that.
Yeah, definitely. And can you remember a record that gave you the bug for collecting and digging for records?
I think, I'm trying to think, I made a few notes actually, so I'm just trying to think what would be the one that gave me the bug. Like I said, the Electros, they were my first avenue hugely. But then, Run DMC, I loved Run DMC. So, everything from King of Rock onwards. I've got all their records, of course, now. But, I was really, really got caught by that. And it was around 86, I think, that I really started collecting and got interested in having imports. I had to have the original US import, all that stuff. So it'd be records like Stetsonic's first album, the kind of early Juice Crew stuff. I remember buying MC Shan, the Bridge Beat Biter. I think it was at Virgin in Oxford Street. They had the downstairs. They had a great hip hop selection there. And I would go to Groove Records. I would go to the Virgin at the time because they were really good. And some of the other stores, I'm trying to remember, Hitman Records in the early days. And then later on you had Unity and all those other shops come along. So, but in those early days, it was those kind of imports around '86 where I started really coveting those records and wanting them. And I had a paper round at the time, and it was that kind of financed it. Every bit of money, I had a paper round, and I got a job washing up in a restaurant, and every bit of money I got went on records. And I've still got a lot of those records that I bought back in the day from those shops.
That's good. The worst, I hate it when you hear stories of people selling records.
Oh, I've sold some and regretted it, absolutely.
Yeah. Everyone you speak to regrets it.
Oh, definitely. My collection's quite fluid, so I've definitely got rid of a few over the years that I've regretted, but luckily I've kept the staples.
Cool. What do you think is the most treasured record in your collection?
I think, and this is going to sound a bit sycophantic, in terms of what I treasure, well, so, as you know, I kind of relaunched my music career around about 2009, so about sort of 12 years ago, having done the stuff back in the day and with Liberty Grooves. And I think for me, actually, it is some of those records that I've done. It almost changed my collecting mentality quite a bit, because prior to that, I was really caught up. I mean, I used to see a lot of Arrow from First Down, and he and I were, and another guy, Skim, massive record collectors, and we'd be just, in true hip hop style, we'd just be trying to outdo each other. So, you know, he would get the latest random record, Cobra MCs or whatever, and then I'd be right, I've got to beat you with something else, and we were just constantly battling each other. Then of course I started making music again, 2009, where we released some of the Liberty Grooves stuff that we hadn't done, and then I started in 2012 my kind of solo career again, as it were, and so my most treasured records would be some of those. I mean, probably if I looked at my albums, my second album, I love the 3 albums I've done, but my second album, Other Side, for me, that was the album I felt, in terms of putting it together, that I executed the best. I love them all, but that one just felt the way it came together. So, and it's hard to put a finger on why, and so I really treasure that record. Like I say, it feels a bit sycophantic saying this about my own stuff, but these are records that I really treasure, and probably also my track labels, that the original Jar 1 version that appeared on Bits and Bobs, and the Smooth remix that appeared on my most recent single, because both of those, you know, are the records that really kind of were the first one opened doors at the BBC for me, and they've got me to a much wider audience, and you know, oh God, that sounds terrible saying that. I made them because I loved them, but they open doors, and so they've got a special place for me. And the final one I would say also is, you know, Beeline Recordings, which is one of the labels I record, the main label I record for now. I also record for AE Productions, and I've done some stuff for Brick Hall Romance as well. But Beeline Recordings, I'm a bit of a fanatic with their stuff, and it's Specific's label. But I probably, and I think Specific would probably confirm this, I probably have the biggest collection of Beeline stuff now, because each record has a test pressing with different artwork, and I think I've got everything bar one, and I think Specific's going to sell it to me hopefully very soon. Or maybe not, who knows, or maybe I'll get one somewhere else. But other than that, I think I've got pretty much everything that's on Beeline. You know, those records really mean something to me, because it feels like a kind of a family connection in a way. You know, a lot of the guys like Chrome and you know, Project C, other artists on the label, Doozer, you know, we do lots of gigs together. I think there's all those records have a lot of meaning for me because of the experiences that I've been through. You know, and the Other Side album, the videos we shot, the gigs we did at the time, like Wu-Tang and supporting Public Enemy and all that kind of stuff, and playing abroad, all those experiences for me are encapsulated in those records, which is why I would have to say those would be my most, if you like, treasured records in my collection.
Yeah, I can understand that though, because any music that you listen to, that you're into, you associate with memories, and your favourite albums. So I can understand if it's actually created by you, and like you said, you've got those amazing headline show memories, and it's part of that Beeline sort of family. I can understand that. I mean,
it's like I'll never forget with How I Get Ill, which is from my first album, and when we supported Public Enemy, which is probably my favourite gig ever, with 2,000 people in front of us. It may even be a few more, and the place was rammed, and I went out there, and with that track we do I had Specific and Jabba the Cut with DJing, and I do this call and response. It's very simple, B line B, and literally the whole, and there's footage of it, the whole 2,000 people chanting Beeline with us, and it was just moments like that are just wonderful. I will never forget them, and I feel privileged to have been able to do that, to share a stage with a group like Public Enemy, who are they're one of my favourite groups of all time, and undeniably one of the most influential and important hip-hop groups of all time. So yeah, those memories are just built into those records, which is why I treasure them so much.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah, that Labels remix, I know we've supported it.
I massively appreciate that.
Honestly, it's the rap 45 of the year for me, that definitely. And the reason why we love it so much is because the venue where we've got a residency, it's just from 7 till 9 on a Friday. It's in a sort of craft beer tap room in a place called Arundel.
Yeah.
We don't really play any expletive lyrics, and we don't play anything too full on. It's like, we do play hip hop, but funk, soul, Latin, jazz, and that track is just a hip hop record that we can play in there week in, week out. It's just that string loop that he's put behind it. It's just,
I've got to give Smooth credit for that. I mean, Jar One, the original, I love what Jar One did with that, and then Smooth created an equally good version, and both of them, full respect to Jar and Smooth. I mean, genius production, and full respect to them for what they did with that, and thank you so much for supporting the record. Hugely, I feel humbled when you I think you sent me a clip one time when you're playing it, and those moments are just, they mean so much. You make these records, and then someone's actually playing it and listening to it, and you're like, wow, could you, as an artist, I almost feel it's like you're giving your time, and I hugely appreciate. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries, man. What's the rarest record in your collection?
Well, I had a big think about this. Now I'll try and pray. This is a long answer, but I'm going to try and speed through this. So I had a long thing. I have owned some incredibly rare records that I got rid of. So the rarest records I've owned are among the rarest hip hop collectibles of all time. So generally, the most collectible rap record I've not owned is often said to be the Unique album, of which we think there's possibly only one. It's sold for 5 figures. No, I've never owned that record, but records I have owned that are close kind of seconds, or maybe not close seconds, but in the past I owned Mr. Magic's Bebop Convention, which is a Connecticut grail. I also own Break a Bitch Neck, Pacanelli, you might have to bleep that one out, which came out on Liberty Grooves. It was a test press only, so obviously I was very connected to that label, because that's the label I've first recorded for. I also own Mystified Equidity Funk, and there are some other very rare old school rap records that I own. Now, those 3 records I mentioned, I have subsequently sold, and I can't claim to have made any money on them because I've pretty much sold them for what I paid for them, although I paid for them by record trades, and the value, I pretty much got the value back. So they're the kind of rarest records I've owned. In terms of the records I currently own rarest, I've almost divided it into 3. So very, very quickly, because I look at my record collection spans the start of hip hop to the end, UK and US. Love it all. I love hip hop in all eras. So UK wise, the rarest pieces I've got, again, among some of the rarest, I've got like the Insane Macbeth Retardation Project album, 2 Times Death, First and Last, things like Sworn Lord, I'm trying to think, I've jotted Body Snatchers, the original Body Snatchers white label, original Hard Noise white label. So I've got pretty much all the rare UK rap records because I've hunted them down for years. I'm a UK rap obsessive. I don't like to call it UK, I'm a hip hop obsessive, but hip hop from these shores. Then in terms of old school, I've still got quite a few old school rarities, things like Outlaw 4 $1 Million Legs, you know, it's a very rare Connecticut record from the early 80s. Things like the Delmar releases, Super 3, and Spider D, you know, I've got all of those, and others like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde doing the do. So I've got quite a few old school rarities, solo sounds and so on. And then I've also got rarities from the 80s and 90s, such as things like BQ in Full Effect, Pete Rock, Mecca and Soul Brother, Wig Out Mix, Test Pressing, I mean, Feel Most Chill on Tempo Jack Original, and I could go on. So yeah, there's quite a few rare records I've picked up over the years, and there's many, many more. Although there are collectors out there who eclipse me that I know who've got some insane stuff, but I've got a fair share of bits and pieces, and I'm happy to say that I haven't always paid top dollar as well, because quite a lot of it I got back in the day. But of course, when things like DJ Ivory, you know, Evil came out, it fueled the collection, and you know, we all went mad, and I ended up racking up a lot of debt because I couldn't really afford it, which is why I then sold some of those super big pieces later on. But I also, I mean, I keep abreast of it because you probably know I write for Record Collector magazine, so I've been writing for them for about 15 years now, and I do most of the hip hop. In fact, I completed my latest article today, actually, which will be out in a month or two. But I've been writing for them for a while, so I kind of, you know, and I like to have the records I write about. So I have this weird thing, you know, that I have to own the records that I write about, and so most of the things that I've written about, apart from the unique album, I own or have owned, you know, because it's that weird collecting mentality.
What record would you say has most inspired you over time?
I'm trying to think. I mean, records like, if I go way back in the day, you know, records, I always loved MC Shan. I mentioned him earlier. Marley Marl Scratch, that record still, I constantly play. That record just blows me away. It was the perfect record in 1985 for me. Kane Records, Cool G Rap Records, and so on. But I think in terms of inspiration, I'd have to actually go to the present day and the last sort of 10 years, because what actually inspires me as an MC is the incredible talent I'm surrounded by, and you know, people like Chrome and Ill Inspired, who are on the same label as myself, people like Feel Most Chill, Oxygen, and I can mention many other MCs in our current scene, you know, who are incredible, and respect all of them. And I think in a way they all inspire me, you know, because there's just such a hunger at the moment, and such a, I don't know, I feel the last 10 years there's been a real kind of, I feel there's been lots of golden ages in UK hip hop history, right from the sort of late 80s with Musical Life and MC Duke and Hijack and all that, to the 90s, to the low life time, you know, with Jest and Champions of Nature and all that. And then it went a bit quiet, sort of 2006 maybe to about 2011, 12. And the last 10 years have been a real, for me, I feel it's been a real kind of another kind of golden age in hip hop from these shores. And so, you know, there's so many artists that inspire me at the moment. You know, the ones I've mentioned, and a lot of the guys on Boot, you know, big up to Jazz, and, you know, a lot of the artists they put out, like Ransom and so on, and Capo, and there's loads of all the, I think these are the people in a way that inspire me, because I listen to their records and I think, wow. And I'm never trying to, I know hip hop is a competitive thing, I'm never trying to make a better record, because hip hop is subjective, it's art, and by definition I don't think you can say this person is better than this person. It's art, it's interpretation, it's what ticks your boxes. But But what I feel these artists do for me is I listen to a new record by an artist, and I mean I take the brand new Jazz T remix on Boot Records, which is what I thought of that, which is with Roughneck Jihad.
Yeah.
Incredible 7-inch, blew me away, bought it instantly. And you know, at the moment, you know, I'm bumping that, and I'm influenced by that because I think, wow, what a great record. So I think, yeah, my inspiration is all of the current crop of artists, because they're making such great music, and it kind of inspires me to carry on and do my best to sort of hone my craft, as it were.
Yeah, sure. That was another question actually. So just asking about your experience of hip hop in your youth compared to, and what this sort of scene and the whole culture was like then compared to what it is now. So do you think it's vastly different nowadays, like you've said, because of the internet, and obviously everyone grows up and changes, but I think there's a lot of artists now that have got sort of old school, more of an old school approach to things, or that have been around for 3 or 4 decades, that are still like Strange Strange Universe, Kashmir.
Yeah.
They're it's
incredible,
wildly different music, but they've been making music and writing and producing for 30 years now, probably 25 years now. So there's a lot of people like yourself as well that are still putting music out with hip hop music, but you've been around the block a lot, so it's still got all that, I don't want to say old school sound, but it's still got those qualities to it, which I find makes the scene so interesting. And then you've got new, younger artists on High Focus and Blah Records and all that as well going on. So there's so much to it, isn't there? Like you said, it is a strong scene. I think.
I love the. Sorry, go on.
No, I was saying, I think it's just a strong scene at the moment, generally.
No, I would agree, and I love the fact there are. I mean, I listen to all hip hop, and one of my pet hates is when people say I only listen to 80s hip hop, or all new hip hop's rubbish, and I hate that attitude. I mean, I've always had quite an open mindset. So my teacher head coming in, and as a result, you know, I listen to anything really, and yeah, there is some new stuff I just don't get, I don't understand. I wouldn't denigrate it, I don't understand it, but equally there's a lot of new young artists who I think are incredible, but at the same time I think it's great that there are older artists who are still making music, because if you look at other genres like rock music or whatever, people don't just suddenly stop at 30, and why should they? You know, you listen to someone like Atmosphere in the US, one of my favourite kind of current US hip-hop bands, and they've been, their first records around 97, but they were doing stuff in the early 90s, and they're still making incredible albums, and albums that really speak to me. So I love the fact there are at different ages, but to answer your question, how has hip-hop changed? I think it's changed in a number of ways. I think, as you touched on, access it's so much, in a sense, easier now. Back then, you had to, firstly, you know, we were all a lot younger. You had to have someone who could afford the equipment. And I always found the crews kind of formed around the people who could afford to have the turntables. I could never afford to have any of that stuff. And so I started with my Beatbox MSD. It was the two of us, you know, with our, you know, doing stuff off tape. And then you meet someone like I met Johnny F, and, you know, he had the equipment, and you kind of go from there. But I think what I'm saying is there were much higher barriers to entry back then. And so if you were part of a collective and someone had that equipment or whatever, then you could go ahead and do your thing. So, but that doesn't mean that, because I think now, you know, it's easier to get into, but I think there's also some incredible creativity. So I think the scenes are as creative back then as they are now. They're just different. What I would say is, for me, I mean, this last 10 years have been incredible, and probably my favourite period in music because of all the experiences I've been through. But when I go back to those early days, it it was just so different. And I think back to the Liberty Grooves days when we used to freestyle in the shop with people like Big Ted, Mello, and all that kind of stuff. And those are almost like magical days. Like I almost think, did they really happen? But I was a youngster then, relatively speaking. So I was maybe a couple of years younger than Mello. We'd be in there and I'd freestyle with them, and there were tapes of us, as Principal Mark from the Prime Rhyme Masters, all these people who it was wonderful. Those days were magical for me. I wish I'd taken more photos. I wish I'd recorded more stuff, but I guess I was younger and more naive then. But they acted as a great platform. So they were magical in that sense. Nowadays, one thing that probably is very different actually is back then, I think if I'm going back to the early 90s, we had a jam that we sponsored as Liberty Grooves, which is called Flavour of the Month at the Borderline Club in London. And I wasn't always there because by that time I'd moved to Southampton, I think, but I would come back and forth, and I would go to quite a few of the nights with Johnny F. And back then it was kind of like, I can remember some of the fights and things that broke out, but it was quite a hostile environment to perform in. So you're up on stage and it's like everybody's checking you out and thinking I'm better than you. And people just, it was like this. There was a lot of that. And whereas nowadays I feel the gigs, I think because it might just be that because my audience is predominantly older now, because they've kind of grown with me. Fortunately, I do have kind of younger people listen to my music as well, but the vibe just seems different. It just seems more fun these days. I think, I don't know why. And don't get me wrong, those days were magical and I loved them, and they were really great, those formative years. But nowadays, I feel the gigs we do, there's more of a self-deprecating fun element to it nowadays, I would say, compared to how we were back then. But that might be because we were all teenagers with a lot of angst and we were trying to prove ourselves, because I was as bad as the next man, in fairness. I was standing there going, I'm better than you, so yeah. It's probably just an age thing.
Yeah, it's probably fun nowadays because a lot of the people have got kids, so if they're at a night out at a gig, you're going to have a good time, aren't you?
Absolutely. And it changes you as well, doesn't it? Those responsibilities make you see life differently, I think, And that's not to take anything away from that youthful drive, because actually that kind of youthful angst and so on is incredibly creative. And, I say this from a perspective as a teacher, if you can harness that, you can create so much. So they have their place in time. Yeah,
of course. And what aspect of the culture did you get into first? Was it, was there one specific element that you latched onto more than others? I know you started rhyming in sort of late 80s, but were you breaking? Did you ever?
Right. Yeah. I would say that our first, my first entree, if you like, into the culture was b-boying, breaking, and I can remember going. It's one of the lines in Labels, going to Margate, Ben Bon Brothers. We used to go there. We'd get the train down there, and I remember I went with my crew at the time. We were called the Radioactive Crew. Then I don't know whether we were crew or posse by then, but it kind of varied depending on what trend we were trying to follow. But it's probably crew actually because of what I'm going to say. But I can remember there were some turnstiles, and in this sort of big empty room, and we were. I this weird memory of us breaking to Queen of Rocks. We were well into the pop art, Roxanne Shante stuff, and so we were breakers, b-boys. And I was never particularly great at it. I mean, the crew, there was a guy called Paul. He was a really good body popper. There was MSD, my beatbox. He was a really good body popper. I did floor work really badly. There's another mate of mine, Samir. There was a group of us, and we were into everything. We were into BMXing, we were into skateboarding a bit later on after BMX. And we were into b-boying as well. But yeah, I was never any good at it, and always had a bit two left feet, really, I think. So yeah, that was my first. And I did a bit of graph as well. But again, I wasn't. I mean, actually, I was all right at art, actually, but I'd never. I think I spent too long tracing things out of subway art rather than actually trying to be original and do my own thing. You know, I do a lot of tagging, but yeah, I was pretty rudimentary. So I think when rapping, if you like, grabbed me, I kind of I packed everything away and thought. Once I realised I could write a half decent rap, in my opinion, anyway. That was the way that I went.
And just going back to the record collection, is there one in your collection that as a DJ you can throw it on and it will just rip up a party if you are DJing somewhere?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends on the set I'm playing. If I'm doing I tend to do hip hop because that's. I mean, well, so if where I live actually, we in the past, obviously we locked down, we haven't, but we quite often had parties where we get the turntables out, and I've got a couple of mates and we all DJ and we take turns. And I would tend to play funk, you know, quite because everyone dances to you know. So you know, I'll pull anything, you know, stuff like Lynn Collins' Think and Maceo and the Max always gets the floor filled. If I'm at like a hip hop event, so we do a thing called the Cold Crush. And hopefully it's going to start again. Well, I say we, it's Specific actually does all the legwork, but fortunately lets me DJ at them. And I will normally either do an 80s hip hop set or a 90s hip hop set. If it's 90s, it's going to be stuff like Tribe Called Quest, Scenario, Pete Rock, Go With The Flow, Always Fill The Floor. If it's 80s, then it's things like Run DMC, Peter Piper, Beats to the Rhyme, you know, those sort of records. So they'd be the sort of records I'd throw down that guaranteed floor fills.
I'm there. So it sounds like a good set, mate. If that's the sort of stuff you're
yeah, except I suspect you're a much better DJ than me technically. I'm just fading them in and out.
Yeah.
Maybe the odd little yeah.
Yeah, because I know the Cold Crush has been the online radio format, so is that going to be a live event then?
It has been in the past, actually. It was going back to about 2017, 18. I can't remember when it was. We did it as like I think it was monthly at a place called something like 1 Million Postcards or something. It's not quite that in Bournemouth, but it's a really cool venue. And we were, and I think Simon Specific's looking at starting it again, actually. And it was a DJ night that ran for a couple of years maybe, and it predated the Cold Crush radio thing actually.
Okay.
But we adopted that and turned it into the radio, which for a while comprised my Pioneers hip hop. Because I had a brief hiatus from Kane FM, mainly because I was just struggling with the driving and the late nights driving back and forth from the studio. But nowadays I do the show from home because of the technologies to do that now. So I still do Pioneers and Kane FM, and then we also do the Cold Crush radio as well, which is great fun. Really enjoy that.
Because Simon put on Roper Dope, wasn't it, as well?
Yeah, that's right, Roper Dope.
Gutted I didn't make that last one.
Well, I mean, knowing Simon, there'll be something else, but it might have to, because before Roper Dope there were the Beeline Jams back at the Winchester in Bournemouth, and we did Beeline Jam 1 to 3, and I think the first Beeline Jam was 2014 off the back of some gigs we've been doing at the Winchester, and then it morphed into Roper Dope, and we've done 6 Roper Dopes, and I'm sure it will morph into something else. I'm not sure what at the moment, but you know, it's it'd be great to hook up. I mean, I must get down to your nut sometime actually, because Arundel's not like miles away from where I live. So
yeah, definitely. Well, we do that. We do a couple. We do there's a place on the beach in Worthing called Coast, and there's a really good venue in Brighton called Deadwax Social as well. That's a late one until sort of 3 in the morning. So yeah, definitely. If you're ever down on the south coast. And pop in and see. You mentioned Darrow, he's only down the road from where I live.
Yeah, that's right. Folkestone Way.
Yeah. No, he's in Worthing now.
Oh, he's in Worthing now?
He's lived in Worthing for a long time, yeah.
Oh, maybe it is Worthing. I might be mixing it up.
Yeah, he was originally from... Yeah.
I've not been to his house for so long, so it's... I was thinking he'd moved... Yeah, maybe it's mixing up my places.
Yeah. And did you meet Tricky at that last Roper Dope? I saw
yeah, that was quite funny actually. Yeah, he was just there. I'm not even sure, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think he'd actually specifically come for Rope-a-Dope. I think he just drinks there. I mean, the Rope Walk is a brilliant venue, great pub. Big up to Anne, for all she does, incredible host. And I think he was just there. And so I thought, I've got to, I'm always a huge fan of Massive Attack, obviously. Got chatting with him and said, fancy a quick snap, and unfortunately he did. But yeah, it was a great night, really good fun.
Yeah, I mean, he's his first 2 or 3 albums as a solo artist are incredible, amazing. Yeah, I'd have been in awe if I'd bumped into him in a pub like that.
Yeah, it was great that he was at our gig as well. I mean, like I say, if I'm perfectly honest, I don't think he'd come to see us. I think he'd just come to have a drink there. But it was great to see him, and great because that was our first post-COVID gig, and we'd had so many gigs cancelled. It was so good to get back to it and just perform live, and everyone was amped for it because we're all like desperate for some live music, So hopefully this year we've got a few more things coming up. So it should be good.
Yeah, definitely.
What have you got in the pipeline, music-wise? Can you give us any sneak previews of anything you're working on?
Yeah. No, actually, I've nearly finished my next single. So my next single, it's another 7-inch. I'm quite into doing 7s at the moment. I like the format, in some ways, I've done 3 albums, and I treasure the albums that I've done. But in some ways, there's a certain immediacy with doing a 7-inch. You do a song that you're really happy with, and you want to get it out there, and you can get it out there, when it's ready to go, rather than kind of, putting a full album together. And maybe it's because I've fortunately had the fortune to do 3 albums that now actually I'm quite happy going down that route. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, new single, nearly there. It's coming out on AE Productions, so big up to Mr. Fantastic and his brilliant label. I released my MDM single on this label as well in 2020, and featured on a few AE Productions and releases, and more to come. But yeah, the new single coming out on AE. I reckon it's going to be out. It's nearly fit. I'm hoping it will go to press in a few weeks' time. But with the way vinyl pressing is, I suspect it will be kind of September or so before it comes out. But it's on the A side, I'm working with someone I've always wanted to work with, one of my favourite UK artists, which is Lewis Parker. The A side is myself and Lewis Parker, and Specific on the cut, and Lewis on production, but also on vocals as well. So he raps in the bridges, nice. And I think it's going to surprise people. It's different. It's kind of along the lines of tracks of his, like Sharp. It's quite a dark track, and you'll know from a lot of my records, I like to explore political issues. It's not really political, but it's quite it's called Lucky Number, and it's let's just say it's kind of like the lucky number is almost like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, it's not a lucky number. It's like a bad luck thing almost, if you see what I mean. You have to hear it when it comes out to get the vibe on. But yeah, so the A side is, it's a double A side, I should say. Double A side, Lewis Parker, myself and Specific on the A. On the flip, myself and Smooth have hooked up again with a track that, again, complete contrast. It's much more kind of funky. It's kind of mid-tempo, kind of soulful, funky cut with quite a positive vibe to it. Again, no swearing on either of them, which is actually, you picked up on it earlier, and I don't tend to swear on any of my records, mainly because I work in teaching. It's not a good look for me to have records out there with curses on. I don't feel the need to swear on my records anyway, but I understand why people do, because I think curse words can convey a certain power, but I choose not to on mine. Some of my guests occasionally do. So on the last single, Parky did... he slipped one in, but you know, I loved what Parky did on that. You know, he really brought that record to life, so it was well worth it. And there's a few others. You can go through my back catalogue. There's a few others, but actually the version that's on Spotify is the clean version. So you know, it's so yeah, I tend to keep them clean. But yeah, so I've got that new single coming, which I'm really excited about. Like I say, I can't wait for people to hear it, because it's a little bit different, you know, and I'm always trying to do something different, and then I've got lots of collaborations. So there's a forthcoming specific album on Beeline Recording.
Okay.
I'm on that album. There's a brand new Frankie Raw and Alakazam EP, which the test pressing just dropped, and I'm on that EP alongside Remark, Chrome, Specific, Oliver Twist, Mr. Bose, and a host of other artists. That's another great EP. What other collaborations? I've done a collaboration with Beatrix coming up. There are some others I'm not sure I'm allowed to say at the moment. Okay, but I've done quite a few collaborations that will be coming out later this year, but I'm not sure I can talk about all of them. But those have all been talked about on social media or whatever, so I think I can mention those. So yeah, lots to come, and gig-wise, it's still quite quiet. You know, as you'd expect, because of you know, things are taking a while to pick up. We were due to do a gig with Chrome Plus and Holly Flow Lightly at Norwich Arts Centre. We played there a few years ago, lovely venue, but because of COVID it got pulled. That would have been a few weeks ago. But we're doing a festival on the Isle of Wight in June, which I'm looking forward to. It's just been confirmed, I think, that we're hopefully going to play at Lindisfarne Festival again in the autumn, where we played there a couple of years in a row actually, and in fact one year headlined the hip-hop stage on Saturday night, I think it was, which was great. Big up to Sandy, all the Newcastle crew. Love what everybody does up there, so great scene. And yeah, hopefully some other bits and pieces. Hopefully some Cold Crush DJ nights, and yeah, and so not a lot at the moment compared to previous years, but I think it's just slow picking up. But, I think the diary will start to fill, definitely.
Yeah, it sounds exciting stuff. The AE release in particular, that sounds right up our street.
Yeah, I can't wait to drop it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of AE. They've put out, I like the emcee 12 that he put out last year.
Oh,
and the last couple of 45s as well. And I think my favourite of all though, from I think it was 2018, the Nilla album, and produced by Ghetto Socks. I mean, that's just, honestly, I think it's incredible. Production, everything, the artwork, just as an independent hip hop release from a label it's based in Bristol, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
It's just phenomenal, I think.
I totally agree. Yeah, I have to say that Nilla album for me is one of the best albums in years, and I still play it. It's one of those few albums where every track is a winner.
Yeah.
And you know, big ups to Nilla. I mean, we had the fortune of, she came over, and I think it was 2017. We did a couple of gigs with Nilla and Ghetto Socks. So we had them at Rope-a-Dope. And then we did a gig in Bournemouth with them, and both of them incredible artists, and you know, very humble, and yeah, really enjoyed performing with them, and yeah, their music's second to none.
Yeah, well, it's funny, we met them they came as part of that sort of, I think they did a little mini tour in the UK.
Yeah, they did. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. They did a little gig at just a small little pub in the Lanes in Brighton called the Black Lion.
And
I know the Black Lion, I've played there. Yeah.
Have you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wicked. And yeah, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, and met them. Yeah, Justin was with them, and Ghetto Socks and Nilla, and yeah, they're really nice people as well.
Absolutely.
And they smashed
incredibly talented.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they smashed that gig.
I just wish Nilla had released another album on Desperate.
Oh no, tell me about it.
Such a great album. I'm going to play it later. So good.
Cool. And where's the best place people can find your music, or what's the best social media channel to follow you on?
Probably the best place is, I don't tend to use every platform because I just find it hard to keep up with them all. So there's a Whirlwind D YouTube page, which has all my music videos on. It also has, I'm starting to upload my Pioneers HipHop shows onto there, the ones I can, because anything with like 90s HipHop, YouTube won't let me upload because of copyright. So it's got Pioneers HipHop shows on, it's got live stuff, loads of our live performances, and it's got the music videos. So Whirlwind D YouTube, also Instagram, and I tend to post daily on Instagram, and it's a mixture of artist stuff and record collecting stuff. And then we've got there's a Whirlwind D, I think it might be called Solid of Mine Rap, Facebook page with stuff on there as well. I did have a website, but I in the end I got rid of the website because I wasn't convinced it was, you know, worth paying the money each year to keep the website going. So I'd say Facebook, YouTube, Instagram are the kind of spots to keep up with what we're doing, any gigs, any releases, all that kind of stuff.
Cool. Okay, well, I'll drop the links in the comments on this video as well. And thanks so much for your time, Dudley. It's been wicked to speak to you. And look forward to the next release.
Thank you to you. It's been a real pleasure, and you know, you hosted us during lockdown for that Live from the Groove, which we love doing. So yeah, big ups to you guys as well.